In the quiet mountains, a police dog suddenly uncovered a tunnel no one knew existed. Each step inside revealed secrets buried for decades, with signs of something or someone that was never meant to be found. But when Rex led the team deeper, what waited at the end left every officer frozen in shock. Here's the full story, but before we continue, tell me where in the world are you watching this video from in the comments below. And make sure you've subscribed, because the next mystery we uncover, you definitely don't want to miss it. The early morning mist rolled low across the mountains, weaving itself between jagged rocks and thick pine woods. Silence ruled the wilderness, broken only by the distant call of a hawk. But this silence was not the peaceful kind. It was heavy, almost as if the land itself held its breath. The mountain had always been known for its rugged trails, its sudden weather shifts, and its hidden paths that no map ever captured. Yet for the officers who had been called here, the place carried something else that morning, a sense of the unknown. The police unit had been deployed after reports of strange activity in the foothills. Locals had whispered about flickering lights seen at odd hours, the echo of machinery where none should be, and the unnerving disappearance of a group of hikers weeks ago. At first, these whispers had been brushed off as mountain folklore, the kind of rumors that fed on fear and isolation. But when search teams returned empty-handed from their hunts for the missing, and when newer reports began to match the older ones almost word for word, the department could no longer ignore what was happening. Something was hidden in those slopes, and someone or something did not want it to be found. The team's greatest asset that morning was not the officers themselves, but the German Shepherd at their side. Rex had built a reputation across the county as a police dog, whose instincts rarely failed. His nose had uncovered contraband in places where officers were sure nothing was hidden. His persistence had unearthed evidence that turned cold cases into solved ones. And more than once his warnings had saved his handler from walking into danger unseen. This mountain was unfamiliar to him, yet the dog carried himself with the confidence of one who already sensed there was more here than met the eye. As the officers moved higher into the forest path, Rex became restless. His ears pricked forward, his movements more determined, as though the air itself carried something no one else could detect. His handler tightened the leash but trusted the dog's judgment. Every small change in Rex's posture had meaning. A low growl at the undergrowth might point to more than an animal scurrying. A sudden halt on the trail could mean the faint trace of something buried beneath soil or stone. And today, Rex was pulling harder than usual, nose to the ground, weaving back and forth as if chasing a scent invisible to all but him. The group followed. The air grew colder, the trees denser, and the path less defined. The mountains seemed to close in around them, shadows shifting in ways that tested the nerves. An uneasy thought settled in the back of everyone's mind. Were they walking toward the unknown lights and sounds reported by locals, or toward something that wanted to stay hidden? Rex stopped suddenly. His paws dug into the ground, his entire body stiff. His handler knew this stance well. It meant discovery. But what? The officers fanned out, scanning the area. Nothing seemed unusual. A rocky slope stretched ahead, broken only by the roots of ancient trees. Fallen branches lay scattered. To the human eye, there was nothing here but mountain wilderness. Yet Rex refused to move. His nose pressed against a cluster of rocks at the base of a slope, his tail rigid, his breath sharp and urgent. Then he began to scratch. The sound of his claws against stone echoed louder than it should have in that quiet place. Each scrape revealed something hidden beneath the surface, soil darker than the rest, loose gravel, and a faint hollow echo beneath. The handler stepped closer, and it became clear. This was not just rock. The ground shifted in an odd way, as if concealing an opening. Rex growled low, determined, his body angled toward the rocks with an unshakable focus. He had found something, and it was no ordinary find. The officers cleared the area with cautious hands. As the rocks and soil gave way, a dark void appeared beneath. It was not a natural crevice. The edges bore marks that were too precise, too deliberate. This was an entrance, an old tunnel buried by time and nature, waiting silently until this moment. A breath of cold, stale air escaped from within, carrying with it a faint metallic tang that sent shivers through the group. The tunnel had been sealed, forgotten, and now disturbed. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Why was there a tunnel here, hidden in this isolated mountain? Who had built it, and for what purpose? The missing hikers, could they have stumbled across this very place? And the lights the locals saw, were they connected to something still alive within these walls of earth and stone? Rex barked sharply, breaking the officer's hesitation. He tugged at the leash, pulling toward the tunnel mouth as though urging them to follow. His handler hesitated. Protocol dictated caution, but the dog's instincts had never been wrong. The opening was widened, enough for a man to crawl through. Flashlights pierced the blackness, revealing a path that sloped downward into shadows deeper than the mountain itself. Dust floated thick in the beam, disturbed for the first time in decades, perhaps longer. The group moved cautiously. Each step into the tunnel felt like a step into another world. The air grew colder, heavier, carrying scents no one could place. The sound of dripping water echoed faintly, suggesting an underground system. Rex's paws tapped steadily on the ground, his body tense yet sure, as though he knew where this path led, even if no human could guess. The tunnel stretched far, deeper than expected, its walls lined with timber supports that had rotted yet held firm. Whoever had built this had known what they were doing. The deeper they went, the stronger the sense of unease became. Small details stood out, a rusted lantern discarded against a wall, markings etched faintly into stone, footprints half preserved in the dust, though the air felt untouched for years. Nothing here matched the idea of an abandoned mine or simple hideout. This place had been used with purpose, but by whom and for what reason? Rex stopped again, his nose pressed to the ground, then to the wall, then forward into the darkness. His body quivered, not from fear but urgency. He growled low, a sound that reverberated against the stone walls. The officers raised their flashlights higher, illuminating what lay ahead. The tunnel widened into a chamber. The walls bore signs of deliberate carving, far too uniform to be natural. Strange crates lay stacked in the corners, their surfaces coated with decades of dust. Metal fragments gleamed faintly from piles of debris, and on one wall, half covered by mold and grime, was something that silenced every breath. A faded emblem, one that none expected to see in this remote mountain. It hinted at origins that carried weight, perhaps even danger, and tied this place to a time long past yet not forgotten. But before questions could be formed, Rex barked sharply again, his body angled toward the far side of the chamber. There, hidden in the shadows, was another tunnel, smaller, narrower, leading even deeper. The sound of dripping water grew louder from that direction. The dog refused to move away, his instincts pulling him toward that path, as if he knew the true secret lay beyond. The officers exchanged tense glances. The crates, the emblem, the carved chamber, all of it suggested history that someone had gone to great lengths to bury. But Rex's focus was unshakable. Whatever was hidden in this mountain, he was determined to uncover it. The mystery had only begun to unfold, and as the dog's bark echoed against the stone walls, every man present felt it, the sense that they were standing on the threshold of something that would connect the strange reports, the missing people, and the silent warnings of the mountain itself. Something was waiting in the depths, and it was only Rex who could lead them to it. The officers stood frozen in the chamber, the faint beams of their flashlights cutting through the still air. Dust swirled lazily, disturbed only by their movements and the sharp barks of Rex, whose gaze never left the darkened passage that stretched beyond the chamber. The silence of the place pressed on them like a weight. Even the smallest sound, boots scraping against stone, breath echoing against the tunnel walls, felt amplified, carried deep into the unseen depths. Rex's bark was not random. His handler knew this tone well. It was the sound of a dog insisting, demanding to move forward because something important was ahead. He did not bark like this unless he was certain. And when Rex was certain, the officers had learned, It meant that they were standing on the edge of discovery. The chamber already raised questions the men struggled to answer. The emblem carved into the wall hinted at a history connected to conflict and secrecy, something deliberately hidden in the mountain. The crates stacked in the corners were too heavy to have been carried casually. And the fact that this entire tunnel was still standing, its supports unbroken despite decades of abandonment, proved that it had been built with expertise and purpose. But what purpose? And why here in a mountain that villagers swore carried strange lights at night? The handler crouched beside Rex, placing a steadying hand on his fur, but the dog's body remained tense. His nose pressed toward the smaller tunnel, ears pricked, tail rigid. He would not relax until they followed. The decision was made. They would press deeper. The smaller tunnel was narrow, forcing the officers to stoop as they moved. Timber supports lined the walls, but many had splintered, leaving the stone to bear the weight. The air grew colder still, carrying with it the faint scent of rust and damp earth. The sound of dripping water grew louder with each step, forming an eerie rhythm that echoed with their footsteps. Every few steps, Rex stopped, sniffed the air, then pressed forward again. He was leading them as though following a trail invisible to the human eye. His handler trusted this completely. The German shepherd's instincts had saved lives before, and here in this mountain, those instincts seemed sharper than ever. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened into another chamber. This one was different. Its floor dipped into a shallow pool of water, fed by a small trickle that dripped from cracks in the ceiling. The air smelled stronger of metal here, mixed with something else, something faintly chemical, faintly unnatural. And scattered across the floor were remnants that sent a shiver through every man present. Scraps of fabric, rusted tools, the outline of what once might have been bedding. Someone had lived here, hidden from the world above. But why? The flashlights swept the walls, catching glimpses of carvings scratched into the stone symbols, words in half-faded languages, marks that seemed almost frantic. Some were tallies, lines carved over and over as though counting days. Others were crude maps, circles and arrows pointing deeper. And in the far corner, half buried beneath rocks and dust, lay something more tangible, a leather-bound book, swollen from dampness but still intact. Rex sniffed at it, his paw scraping lightly at the cover. His handler lifted it carefully, brushing away grime. The faded ink on the first page revealed something chilling. The journal belonged to one of the missing hikers. The entries inside, though smeared and hard to read, spoke of discovery, of stumbling across the tunnel by accident, of exploring with excitement that quickly turned to dread. The last legible words spoke of strange noises deeper inside, of lights where there should be none, of the sense that they were not alone. The chamber grew colder as those words sank in. The missing hikers had been here. The rumors of their disappearance now connected directly to this hidden place. But what had they found beyond? Rex barked again, sharper this time, his body angled toward yet another opening at the far side of the chamber. Unlike the others, this passage had no timber supports, no careful carving. It was jagged, natural, as though the mountain itself had cracked open to reveal a deeper vein. The sound of water echoed from within, and faintly, so faintly it seemed almost imagined, there was a glimmer of light, not from their flashlights, but from something farther down. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. A tunnel built by human hands was one thing, a natural passage was another, and yet the light, unexplainable, unnatural, drew them in. Rex tugged hard on the leash. There was no question in his mind. The truth lay ahead. They pressed forward once more. The passage narrowed and twisted, forcing them to move single file. The walls pressed close, damp and cold to the touch. Stalactites hung from the ceiling, dripping water that splashed into shallow pools. The air carried a humming vibration as if the mountain itself was alive with some hidden energy, and the faint glow grew brighter with every step, illuminating the passage without the need for their flashlights. When they finally emerged, the sight before them stole every breath. The chamber was vast, a cavern carved by nature's hand but altered by human presence. Its walls glowed faintly with veins of mineral that shimmered like silver under the light. Pools of crystal-clear water reflected the glow, casting ripples across the ceiling. And at the center of it all stood structures that should not have existed here. Pillars of stone shaped into deliberate forms, remnants of construction far older than the timber-supported tunnels above. It was as though they had stepped into a place where the natural and the man-made had collided, leaving behind a secret lost to time. Rex moved forward with determination, his nose close to the ground, weaving between the stone pillars. He barked suddenly, drawing their attention to a collapsed section of the cavern wall. There, half buried beneath rubble, lay something metallic. The officers worked together to clear the debris, revealing what appeared to be the rusted remains of machinery, large, complex, far beyond what any hiker or villager could have brought here. Pipes jutted from it, gears corroded with time, but its scale suggested it once served a purpose that demanded secrecy. The emblem carved into the tunnel wall above now made sense. This was no accidental hideout. Decades ago, perhaps during a time of war, this mountain had been used as a base. The crates, the supplies, the machinery, all pointed to a hidden operation buried in the wilderness, forgotten when its purpose ended. But if it had been abandoned so long ago, why had the hikers written of lights and noises? Why did the villagers still whisper of flickering glows? And what had Rex sensed, pulling them deeper with unwavering certainty? The answer revealed itself in the next moment. From the shadows of the cavern came a sound, soft at first, then louder. Not the sound of dripping water, not the creak of stone. It was rhythmic, deliberate, echoing like footsteps. The officers froze, flashlights swinging wildly, but the light from the mineral veins continued to glow steadily, showing no sign of movement. Rex growled, low and fierce, his body angled toward the far end of the cavern. His tail bristled, his stance protective. Whatever was there, he had detected it long before the humans had. And then, as if to confirm every whispered rumor, the faint glow deepened, pulsing as though alive. The cavern seemed to breathe, the walls shimmering with strange life. The air thickened, heavy with tension, and in that instant, every man present knew one truth: they were no longer exploring something abandoned. Something or someone still remained in the depths of this mountain. Rex's growl grew sharper, echoing against the cavern walls, urging them onward. The mystery was not yet solved, and the true heart of the mountain's secret was waiting just beyond the shadows. The cavern was alive with silence, the kind that does not soothe but unsettles. The officers held their breaths as the faint glow in the mineral veins pulsed like a heartbeat, casting shifting shadows across the stone pillars. The rhythmic sound, the footsteps or something like them, grew louder, echoing against the walls until it was impossible to tell from which direction it came. Rex stood rigid, his body angled toward the far side of the cavern. His growl rumbled low, protective, warning. His handler felt the vibration through the leash, through the hand pressed against the dog's tense muscles. Rex had led them here for a reason, and whatever lay ahead, the German shepherd was ready to face it. The glow grew stronger, and then suddenly the sound ceased. A hush fell so complete that even the dripping of water from the stalactites above seemed to stop. The officers raised their flashlights, beams cutting through the glow, sweeping across the cavern's walls. At first nothing stirred, and then the rubble at the far end shifted. Rocks slid against each other, falling in slow cascades, until something metallic beneath them was revealed. Not machinery this time, but a door, a steel door embedded into the cavern wall, rusted but intact, its edges sealed by time. Rex barked sharply, lunging forward until the leash went taut. He scratched at the ground, claws scraping stone, then looked back at his handler as if to demand the obvious, open it. The officers approached cautiously, clearing away the last of the rocks. The door's surface bore the same faded emblem they had seen earlier, now clearer, unmistakable. It confirmed what they had begun to suspect. This cavern had once been more than just a storage chamber or shelter. It was an entrance to something far larger. With effort, they forced the handle. The door groaned as it gave way, releasing a rush of air that smelled stale and heavy with rust. Their flashlights pierced the darkness beyond, revealing a corridor, metal-lined, industrial, stretching farther than any of them expected. This was no natural cavern. It was part of a hidden facility buried deep beneath the mountain. Rex surged forward, nose to the ground, pulling them in without hesitation. The corridor was narrow, lined with rusted pipes and corroded wires that hung like vines. The walls echoed with each step, amplifying their presence. Old signs in faded paint marked doors along the passage: storage, communications, barracks. Each door they passed whispered of a time when this place had thrived with life, secrecy, and purpose. And then they reached the end. The corridor opened into a chamber larger than the rest, one that still carried signs of human presence. Tables overturned but intact. Machinery silent but whole. Papers brittle with age scattered across the floor. And at the center of it all, a generator massive, its shell rusted but its core faintly humming. That was the light, that was the sound. Against all odds, the machine still lived, its power drawn from some hidden source within the mountain. It explained the flickering glows villagers had seen at night, the hum hikers had reported before vanishing. This facility was not entirely dead, but that was not all. In the corner of the chamber were remnants no one expected: backpacks, torn fabric, a flashlight cracked open but recognizable, belongings of the missing hikers. They had made it this far, drawn by curiosity, just as the officers had been, and here, perhaps overwhelmed by the vastness of what they found, they had left behind the last signs of themselves. Rex padded toward the pile, sniffing each item carefully. Then he barked once, sharply at a section of the wall. His claws scraped against the metal. The officers moved closer, brushing dust away until they uncovered another hatch. Smaller but functional. With effort, they pried it open. Behind it was a crawl space, narrow and damp, leading upward at a steep angle. Faintly, from somewhere far beyond, came the sound of rushing water. And then something else. Voices, weak, muffled, but unmistakably human. The officers froze. The hikers missing for weeks, could it be? Rex barked again, ears perked, tail wagging slightly now. His stance transformed from urgency to certainty. His instincts screamed the truth. They were alive. The group moved quickly, crawling through the hatch and into the narrow passage. The air grew fresher as they climbed, the sound of water louder. And then, at last, light pierced through the cracks above. With one final push, they emerged into daylight. They stumbled into a hidden ravine, shielded by cliffs and impossible to see from above. And there, huddled near the mouth of a stream, were the missing hikers. Gaunt, weak, but alive. Their eyes widened with disbelief as the officers appeared, Rex bounding forward with a bark of triumph. Relief washed over every face as the hikers reached out, tears mixing with laughter. The mystery unraveled in that single moment. The hikers had discovered the tunnel by accident, lured deeper by curiosity. They had become trapped when a section of the passage collapsed, cutting them off from the surface. Their only refuge had been the ravine, where the stream provided water but little else. For weeks they had waited, clinging to hope that someone would find them, and it was Rex who had led the way. The officers radioed for rescue, their voices thick with emotion. Supplies were lowered in, and soon the hikers were lifted out, one by one, returning to families who had feared the worst. The mountain, once whispered of with dread, now carried a story of survival, of discovery, of a dog whose instincts had pierced through layers of stone and secrecy to find the truth. As the last hiker was lifted to safety, Rex sat proudly at the edge of the ravine, ears perked, watching. His handler knelt beside him, hand resting gently on his fur. The bond between them needed no words. The German shepherd had done more than uncover an old tunnel. He had given back life where hope was fading. The mountain's secret was solved. The strange lights were no longer a mystery. They were the remnants of a forgotten facility, its machines stubbornly clinging to life. The missing hikers were no longer lost. They were alive, returned because a dog refused to stop searching. And the fear that had gripped the village melted into gratitude, into awe, into a story that would be told for generations. Rex was honored in the days that followed. His name spread beyond the county, spoken with admiration in places far from the mountain. But to him, none of that mattered. What mattered was the wag of his tail, the warmth of his handler's hand, the knowledge that he had done what he was born to do: protect, guide, and uncover truth where humans could not. The mountain stood silent again, its secrets laid bare. But this silence was different now. Not heavy, not fearful, it was the silence of peace. The story had ended not in tragedy, but in triumph. And at the heart of it all was a police dog whose instincts refused to give up until he had brought everyone home.